we're going to talk about understanding illegal harassment, illegal workplace harassment and prevention of discrimination. And we're gonna go through kind of like a road on this, and I want you to know what the road is, because this is going to be kind of fun, kind of boring, then kind of fun, then kind of interesting, then boring. Okay, so I don't want you to think, well, this is kind of fun, this is really boring, this is kind of interesting, this is a little fun, this is really boring, this is kind of fun, because I already know how it's going to go. So it ebbs and it flows and it ebbs and it flows. But you have to have the boring parts. And the reason why you have to have the boring parts, because without the boring parts, you don't really understand the legal and illegal part. So you have to understand that part of the training, because some things are completely illegal, and if you understand the illegal parts, you understand why you can't do what you can do. But see, some things are not illegal, but they're on the road to how we get to illegal. Because here's the thing, I have never believed ever, and I've been doing EEO law now for 25 years, literally 25 years. It's all I know. So I couldn't be a bigger geek on it. Totally, it is my life. So if you ever want to get your party cleared, bring me to it, because I can clear a party pretty quickly, because I have no other topic to discuss but EEO. And the one thing I have learned is that no employee ever went to apply for a job with the sole intent of making your life miserable and making the company's life miserable, because they wanted that job. And at some point, from please hire me, I'm going to be the happiest person on earth if I get this job, at some point they got from there to, I hate this company, I hate this job, and I hate everyone in it. So we have to figure out how they got from there to here, and it's a road, and the road doesn't start rocky, full of illegalness. It started smooth and it hit a bump, and that bump didn't get addressed. And that bump usually wasn't illegal, but then it turned into illegal, and then things went really bad and poorly, and it went south. So I want to explain how that happens. So here's what I want. I want to start with the learning goals for today, because when we're done with today, here's what you're going to learn. One, you're all going to have a working knowledge of illegal employment discrimination. Two, you're all going to have a working knowledge of illegal harassment. So I guarantee you that, so when you leave today, you're going to have a working knowledge of illegal employment discrimination. You all know you're going to have a working knowledge of illegal harassment. But here's what I want more than anything else, because you can have this knowledge and it doesn't do you any good at all, right? I mean, I can have a working knowledge of something, but if I don't know what to do with it, it's useless. So the third most important thing I want you to have, and this will be kind of like the fun part, if you can bear through the boring part, because this will kind of be the interesting but boring part. This will be kind of like interesting, but some parts of this is going to be really boring, and I know it will be. But this is where you're going to get the really interesting part. It's going to be tools to take for proactive measures to prevent workplace harassment. See, that's going to be actually the takeaway. So if you bear through the worst part of this, we're actually going to give you tools on how to prevent workplace harassment, because there actually are tools, and I've learned these tools through 25 years. I can actually tell you exactly what will not work if you have a bullying situation. And people say, no, we've tried that, and I'll say, I know, I'll bet you a buck it wasn't effective, because I know what's effective and I know what's not in bullying. Not when you have discrimination, but in bullying. And today I want us to concentrate on, so I don't want to get into the weeds, today's topic is not understanding race discrimination, not understanding sex discrimination. It's harassment. And harassment is an entirely different animal, because in harassment, you are dealing with emotions. So when I give you tools to proactively deal with this and how to handle this, we're dealing with an entirely different animal. We're dealing with workplace issues that deal with emotions. So you're not going to have to, you can't use the same tools. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. Here's the spoiler alert. I'll bet you at some point somebody has tried mediation and it was ineffective. There's a reason why mediation is never effective when you have a bullying situation. and it never will be effective. See, there's your spoiler alert. So at the end of today, you're going to learn why you can't use mediation. So let's start with the laws enforced by EEOC. EEOC enforces several laws. And you know, and now we can all take bets. Why do we have these in red? And then I'm going to tell you why we have these in red in a second. But we have several laws enforced by EEOC. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, the Equal Pay Act, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, the Rehab Act of 1973, Title I of the Civil Rights Act of 1991, Americans Disabilities Act of 1990, and then its amendment of 2008, and then the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. When I put these in red, people say, oh my gosh, those must be the important laws. Wrong. I put those in red because those are the only ones I'm going to cover. And here's why. Because if I covered all the laws that we enforce, we would be here till about 8 o'clock tonight. And you don't want that, and I don't want that, because I have to drive back to Denver. And although I love Wyoming, I mean, Wyoming, awesome. You know, what is not to love about Wyoming? It's cold here and it snowed. So I have to go home, and you guys want to go home. And if we stay here for hours, you're not going to remember anything I tell you anyways. So these are the 3 laws that I'm going to cover. And the reason why I'm going to cover this is you need to know about these 3 laws when you deal with illegal employment discrimination. Because whenever you're going to deal with illegal employment discrimination, the chances are, when you come to illegal harassment, it's going to fall under one of these 3 issues. The Civil Rights Act of 1967, 64, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act of 1967, or the American Disabilities Act. Probably going to be one of those 3 issues. So let's start with, what is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act? This is my favorite law ever, and it's not because it's the only, you know, law I've ever enforced, you know, as far as title, you know, the EEOC goes, but it's the best law ever. And here's why it's the best law ever. Because it is a cultural law. It deals with everything that is quintessentially American, and it is a law that when you look at what is going to be America today and what is going to be America 50 years from now and what was America 50 years ago, this is the law. You know, you want to see the best law that we could have ever enforced, we could have ever put forward, ever enforced, and ever done in America. It's this law, because this law says that it protects employees, and this is Title VII, so it could be in the other titles, but since I enforce Title VII, which is employment, that's all I care about, because I'm a government employee, and we know as government employees, the only thing we care about is our world. So Title VII of the Civil Rights Act protects employees from discrimination based on race, color, sex, national origin, religion, and I'm not going to address retaliation yet. So what it says is race, color, sex, national origin, religion, but it never tells you what race, what sex, what national origin, what color, nothing. So 1964, how many sexes do you think they thought of when they said it protects you based on sex? 1964, what do you think that room full of men were thinking? 2. And what do you think those 2 were? Male and female. I think that's a doggone fine bet. You know why? Because I watch Mad Men on AMC. and I may not have been in that room, but I've seen enough episodes to think that when they thought sex, they thought men and they thought women. Do you think they could have possibly perceived in 2014 that we would have a 3rd sexual identity? Come on, really? How many people have seen Mad Men? Okay, do you think the men in those boardrooms ever saw a 3rd sexual identity? No. Okay, somebody tell me what that 3rd sexual identity is. Transgender. Okay, now, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act protects employees from discrimination due to sex. Is transgender a sex? Yeah. I mean, EEOC says it is, and until this, and we've had arguments on this, the Macy decision. I mean, so we have fought this diligently and vigorously. So We have said it does, and we haven't been slapped down yet to say it doesn't. So when Congress said sex, we interpret it to mean all sexes, more than one, more than two. We're saying three. So we're saying culturally, since the world has changed to have three sexual identities, we're saying the third sexual identity is covered under this law. And we're saying the law is big enough to accept this. Now, my question is, do you think they saw three sexes? Oh, heavens no. And do you think when they wrote that, that could have possibly even been in their head? Oh, heavens no. You know why? Because my father was one of those people, and I hear my father talk about transgender, and trust me, he doesn't think like I think. And I'm willing to bet many of your fathers don't think like you think. And that's their culture, and there's nothing wrong with their generation and their culture being who they are, and that's what we all embrace is diversity. So let's go to race. 1964, when they wrote race, what races do you think they were thinking of? Black, right? Yeah. I mean, because what was the dominating force pushing the Civil Rights Act of 1964? It was race. It was black. It was the problems of going on with the African American culture then. Jim Crow laws. It was horrendous back then. But they didn't say the black race. They said race. Well, what has happened in the last 50 years? Well, we have taken race and we have said, well, wait a minute. Although we respect the rights of African Americans to strive towards equality in their treatment, they aren't the only race that has been subjected to disparity in treatment based on their race, right? This is what we have said, and this is what we have learned through study after study. There are other people that have been subjected to disparity in treatment. One of the things that I serve on is the White House Initiative on Asian Pacific Islanders. And the people in the Asian Pacific Islander community have a great deal of difficulty because of their race. And they are equally protected under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. But I know that the people in the boardrooms of 1964, when they were drafting this law, they were not considering Asian Pacific Islanders. They didn't even probably give a consideration to what an Asian Pacific Islander was back then, because it was not a racially sensitive environment. But this law, and the point of this is, and I won't expound on it ad nauseum, the point of this is that this law was meant to consider culture, not to be rigid in its standard. And that is what makes this law great, because we don't know what the world is going to look like in our America in 50 years. But this law is designed so that in 50 years, whatever culture will be, this law will accommodate it. That is the great thing about this law. So we can keep moving forward. Now, why does this matter? Because when somebody is harassed, and they are harassed under this law, race, color, sex, national origin, religion, this is where they cross into illegal. So if someone starts, and we're going to get into this, when someone starts berating somebody for these reasons, this is where we cross into illegal. Now, they did something else interesting with this law, is they put in a little provision called retaliation. Love retaliation, because retaliation goes against your natural instinct to get even. And again, far-reaching, well thought out, because if somebody does something to me, my instinct is to get even. So and especially if I'm right, someone wrongs me and I didn't do anything, yow, do I really want to get even? And I'll give you a really good example. When you were a kid, well, it's like this, how many of you have siblings? And I do that with because I was just out with a friend and we were talking about siblings, and he was the oldest, and I made a comment about, well, actually making a comment about my older sister, and I was telling them this story about my brother and I just went to Vegas. My sister lives in Vegas, and I had to pay off a Super Bowl bet. Anybody else have to pay off a Super Bowl bet this year? Yeah. And he lives in Seattle, and so I had to pay off a Super Bowl bet, and enough said on that. And and so the Super Bowl bet was we went to Vegas for the Seattle-Denver matchup, and my sister lives in Vegas, and she's our big sister, and we were looking forward to it. And my sister decided, when my brother and I went into town, my sister decided, well, that's really great that you and Bernie are coming into town, but she wanted to head over to Utah for the weekend, and I'll get together with you guys on Sunday night. And it crushed us. You know, it just crushed us. Now, she didn't see anything big deal. I'm going to see you guys on Sunday. What's the big deal? And Bernie and I were talking about, you know, because I turned to my brother, I said, are you just crushed that Diane just dismissed us and took off and went? And he was like, yeah, that really crushes me. So anyways, I'm with my friend and I'm telling him, you know, that really just crushed us. And he said, well, I don't see what the big deal is. Where do you think he ranked on the sibling scale when he said that? Huh? Oldest, right? And I said, you're the oldest, aren't you? And he said, how did you know that? How did I know that? Because the younger siblings instantly got the, why did you do that to us? That's so crushing. We really, you know, we're that unimportant to you. See, we get it instantly, and then we're wrong. So the first thing Bernie and I start talking about is what every young sibling starts talking about: how do we get even? You know, because we want to get even with her. She hurt our feelings. So we instantly want to retaliate against her because that wasn't fair, Diane. You do that to us every single time. Now, did Diane think she did anything to us? No, she went to Utah with her family because it wasn't any big deal, and she was going to see us on Sunday. But we became 5-year-olds, and we started talking about, well, we just won't be available when she comes back, and we're just not going to do it. And of course, when she came back, we were instantly available because we, you know, year for her approval. But it didn't matter because in our world, we instantly went to, we were wrong, and now we have to get even. See, it's instinct. And so Congress thought, you know what? If that's natural instinct on your relationships, what is going to happen in business? We have to protect people from this natural instinct. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a retaliation provision in that says, no matter how wronged you are, even justifiably wronged, you can't get even with people. And no matter what they do in exercising their rights, when they complain, you still can't get even with them. And here's why. Because if you exercise your right to get even, whether justifiably or not, what's going to happen is nobody else will complain because they're going to say, great law, EEOC, but here's what happens when I complain. When I complain, I get retaliated against. So even if I'm right in my complaint, everybody gets on me and I lose my job. So complaining does me no good. So I'm not going to complain. And the law in itself is ineffective because nobody will utilize it. So Congress said, you can't do that. Here's what we're going to do is we're going to put in a retaliation provision, and the retaliation provision says no matter what, under any circumstances, you can't get even with somebody. So even if they wrongfully accuse you, manager, and I'll use manager, or coworker, we can insert name, but I'll just say managers because managers take the brunt of this law. Even if they wrongfully accuse you, manager, you can't get even with them because to do so would chill everybody else now and forever who might use this complaint procedure. And we're sorry, we know it's terrible, and we know how awful it feels to be wrongfully accused, but the long-term effects forever and ever is not worth it, so you have to take it. We're really sorry. And everybody says, that's not fair. We know. But this is something that you may need to use someday also, and therefore you have to let it stand. And that's how retaliation works. So let's talk about the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. I love the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. I love it actually every year more than I loved it the last year. When I first came to EEOC, it was 1989. In fact, I actually know the date I started work. And I don't know if state employees are like federal employees. I'm going to assume you guys might be. But and federal employees can tell you the exact date and time and hour they started work. And I don't know if you guys have this reason why, but the reason why is because that helps me know exactly what date, hour, and time I can retire. So yeah, okay, yeah, you too? Okay, so I started work December 18th, 1989. And really, if you want to start on the loneliest day of the year, start December 18th, 1989, because everybody's gone. They're all on use or lose, so nobody comes back to the office till January. So you just really just sit there reading compliance manuals all alone, wondering if anybody works there, which is pretty much what happened to me, because the parties are done and everybody's gone, and no one talks to you because you're the new person and no one really cares. So it was kind of, I called it my corporate hazing period. But anyways, when I started working there, I was assigned a mentor, and his name was Herb Packard, and I was talking about him this morning. And he was a great one for the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, because Herbie, and I call him Herbie, Herbie stayed there for about 5 years, and he was definitely on the downshoot of his career when he got me, which I'm sure getting me was probably the cherry on top of the hot fudge sundae that was his career, because I was just the most difficult of all mentees to have, because I knew everything, you know. I don't know if you've ever encountered a coworker like that and had to mentor somebody like that, but I can't imagine a worse person to mentor than me, because I was so brilliant. And Herb spent a whole lot of time saying, well, Patty, I can see why you feel that way, but can I offer an alternative viewpoint? And he'd be like, oh, go ahead. And Herb was just so brilliantly patient with me. And when we came to the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, Herb said, you know, Patty, let me tell you something about this law, because right now you are the young, hip superstar of the office. But in 20 years, you're not going to be the young, hip superstar in this office. And unless you think you're going to win the lottery, you're probably still going to be working. This law, you're going to love this law. Protect this law, because everything you try to get rid of now, you got to live with then. And although 20 years doesn't seem like a long time to you now, it will come very quickly upon you. And of all the advice that Herb gave me, that one I listened to. And I was really surprised how quickly 20 years came. And I was even more surprised how quickly 25 years came. And I realized he was right. I stopped being the young, hip superstar. Although I am still a superstar, I'm not the young, hip superstar. You know, hopefully I never stopped being the superstar, which is what I kept repeating over and over and over again to my boss ever since because I got a new boss on September 22nd. So I repeat to him daily. I actually send him subliminal text messages, superstar. But it is remarkable how much you realize when you're young, and you don't realize you're going to get old, and you don't realize that everything that you dismiss in your youth, I'm not going to need that, you really do need that. And so if I can encourage you to ever hold on to anything, it is the Age Discrimination and Employment Act and all that goes with it. Because someday, unless you win the lottery, you're probably going to be working when you get older. And every law, everything that this law protects, you're going to need that protection. Now, something else that Herb taught me, and wow, this was a great lesson to learn when I was young, is he said, every piece of wisdom, as a matter of fact, Herb actually died a couple of years ago. After he left, I called him all the time. Herb mentored me almost up until the day he died, as well as other people in my career. And I have to say, Herb was right. Very few young people mentored me along my way. Although I will say, I did have some really great young people who helped teach me things like my Apple phone. And if anybody here can explain to me why I just randomly plays tunes, I'm willing to listen. But most of the people that have mentored me and forget that as learn from the older experienced workers. And so you have to respect that, because you forget that as you get so wrapped up into everything that's going on, which is why the Age Discrimination and Employment Act is so wonderful, because it protects you from dismissing the older worker. But if you remember, and if you look back, and if you say, wow, you know who had the greatest impact on my life? chances are it wasn't someone within your peer group, and it wasn't someone who was younger than you. It was probably an older, experienced, wiser worker who walked you through the nuances of employment, who gave you wisdom, who gave you patience, who taught you to let things go. That is the value of keeping the older workers in the workplace. And by the way, in case anybody's looking for a mentor, I always look for people to mentor. And because my goal is the young people, I really want you guys to rise up in your career, because I'm really getting towards the twilight of my career. So the quicker I can shoot you up like a rocket, the more you're going to be there to protect me. I've learned the value of mentoring. For those of you guys who are looking for people to mentor, remember that the quicker you can mentor young people and shoot them up like a rocket into the career, the more you'll have people in place to protect you as you want to relax. Herb actually learned that, and I thought that was awesome. Americans with Disabilities Act. Here is the great thing about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Nobody really completely understands it, no matter how much I explain it, so I'm not going to waste your time explaining it, because we could be here for hours. I will explain three of the most basic things about it. It protects people who are disabled, actually, they have an actual physical or mental disability, they are perceived as having an actual physical mental disability, or they are regarded as having an actual physical disability. So here, I'm going to first cover the record of or regarded as, and because those are the easiest. Record of regarded as, you have cancer. You have a bout of cancer. You've gotten through cancer, and you have now gone into remission, and you've gone back to work full time. You're doing great, but your supervisor is really protective of you. And so because they're really protective of you, they don't want to give you those strenuous job assignments. And it's not because they're angry at you. They're genuinely worried about you, because they went through that bout of cancer with you, as did everybody else, and they don't want anything to happen to you again, so they protect you. That's called record of disability and perception of disability. Those are the two things that they have done to violate the ADA. If they're doing that to you, that's a violation, and they can't do that. So that's the easiest way to explain record of and regarded as. So you have the record of a disability, and they're acting on that record, and then there's perception of it, perceived as having a disability, because they're actually still perceiving you as disabled, even though you have gone into remission, you've got, you're fine, but they still perceive you as sickly, and therefore they're acting on that because they don't want to stress you out, et cetera, et cetera. That's the easiest way to explain record of and perceived as, and I could spend days and hours, and I have, explaining this and going through it, and I deeply enjoy going through the ADA, because I think it's a very interesting law, but we only have so much time, so I'm not going to do that. As far as actual mental or physical disability, the easiest way to explain that is you have to give somebody a reasonable accommodation if they have an actual or perceived disability. And this room is a good example of workplace accommodation. See these lights? See these lights? This will take a moment. No. Okay. For you on the Google Hangout, we have lights in this room, and I don't know if you have lights in your room, but I'm gonna take a broad assumption here that you probably do. Now, here's the interesting thing about lights in this room. I'm willing to bet that when they built this room, they probably weren't in a hurry to use their end of the year funds, the use it or lose it funds, or else we're going to yank it from you and you're never going to have these funds again. And said, oh my gosh, what are you going to do with these funds? I don't know, let's put lights in this room. Because someday somebody's going to have a training, and we're going to have to have lights in the room, because the people who will be attending that training are going to have vision, and they're going to need lights so that they can read the documents. I bet you that didn't happen. I'll bet what happened is they probably said, you can't have a room without lights. There's no windows. How will people see? Right? You think that's probably what happened? I'm going to say that's probably what happened. But I've been doing this for 25 years, so I tend to know the mind of people. That's what I do for a living. I do work with the Colorado Center for the Blind. Guess what they don't think about? Lights and computer monitors and anything dealing with vision. They don't see. It's not a big deal with them. Visual issues aren't a big thing with them. Do you know why it's a big thing for the majority of us? We have vision. The majority of us have vision. So when the majority of the population has vision, when you design something, you design it with the majority of the population in mind. So when they designed this room with the majority of the consumer base in mind. When you have employees, usually the employee accommodation is built in before you ask. So all of you came into this room and you turned on the lights, so you got your reasonable accommodation of light without asking. So you could see your documents. So you didn't have to ask for light to see your document. That was your reasonable accommodation. If you walked into a completely darkened room, you couldn't see your document, and you would have to ask, can I please have light so I can see my document? But you didn't have to ask for that because you all have vision, and it was assumed you'd all have vision, so you automatically got your reasonable accommodation. Now, if somebody had walked in here and they did not have vision, they would have had to ask for a reasonable accommodation so that they could see the same documents that you got to see without asking for an accommodation. That's what the Disabilities Act is all about. It's providing the same level playing field for people who have a disability. One of the mistakes that we make with the Americans with Disabilities Act is we think we're giving people with disabilities something different and something special, when in actuality, we're giving them what you got without asking. And so we're saying they have to ask, give it to them, because you got it without asking. So that's what the Americans with Disabilities Act is about. So if you want to kind of like in a capsulize, I'm not like capsulizing things, especially when you only have till 3:30. So that's it in a nutshell. Okay, so let's get into the fun part, the harassment. Well, this is kind of the fun part, the harassment training. Harassment is the tip of my triangle. Whenever you look at what is illegal, legal, whatever, you know, when I say whatever, because that dismisses it. When you look at the harassment, microaggressions, bullying, there's this triangle that's part of it. Because, like I said, nobody woke up today and said, you know what, I'm going to apply for this job, and then what I'm going to do is once I get that job, I'm going to engage in illegal harassment and test their workplace policy to see how far I have to go until I get fired. That's my goal. Not how it happened. Usually, you have microaggressions, which is the foundation for bullying to the tip of harassment. And so usually it starts with microaggressions, and you have the walls, which are bullying, to harassment. So there is a building block associated. And everybody, by the way, everybody has experienced a microaggression. We're going to talk about microaggressions. And then bullying, everybody has experienced bullying. Nobody in this room is safe from it. If you went to elementary school, if you went to middle school, and if you have a sibling, you have experienced bullying. And workplace harassment, maybe you have or have not experienced workplace harassment, but everybody here knows somebody. If you haven't experienced workplace harassment, you know somebody who has. So everybody here has some sort of knowledge with this. So we're going to start with what is, and I'm actually going to work my way down the ladder, because I want to start with what is illegal. So y'all know what is illegal, and then we're going to work our way down the ladder to harassment, then we're going to go to microaggressions, and then we're going to end with bullying. So what is harassment? Well, harassment is any unwelcome verbal or physical conduct. And that's really it in a nutshell. It's any unwelcome verbal or physical conduct. Well, what is unwelcome? Well, unwelcome is unwelcome. And this is where people have the issue. I don't know what unwelcome is. Really? Because my cat knows what unwelcome is. And so I always get interested when people say, well, I'm really unclear about what unwelcome is. And I say, well, you know, that's really interesting that you don't know what unwelcome is, because animals know what unwelcome is. So if an animal can figure out what is unwelcome by another animal, why is it humans have problems with this? The reason people have problems with this, it is not that you don't know what unwelcome is, you disagree with what unwelcome is. So even though I I know what unwelcome is. I get that there is an implicit or explicit communication from you saying that it's unwelcome. I just disagree with it. So I want you to welcome my behavior. And the fact that you're not angers me. So it is not when I say it is unwelcome verbal or physical conduct that you don't know what I'm talking about. You're just disagreeing with it. And so we need to get on the same page that when people say, well, I don't know what it is. Well, yeah, you do know what it is. You just disagree with it. So let's all agree that if an animal can figure out what is unwelcome, so can humans. So we know what it is. The fact that we don't agree with it is an entirely different discussion. And we're going to talk about why we disagree with it. So it's not a bad thing that we disagree with it. It is just an uneducated thing that we disagree with it. So when is it when we say, you know, it is, as I come over here, the employee did not solicit or invite the conduct. The employee regarded the conduct as undesirable. And so basically we've explicitly or implicitly communicated the conduct was undesirable. And this is where we have the problem. Somebody says, well, they didn't really, I don't know what implicitly or explicitly soliciting the conduct, you know, saying that the conduct is undesirable. I don't know what that means. Okay, I get that. So I'm going to tell you what that means. So if somebody implicitly or explicitly communicates the conduct as unwelcome, it's usually done one of two ways. An explicit communication of unwelcome conduct is as follows: shut up. That is an explicit communication that the conduct is undesirable. Or, no, I don't want to hear that joke. See, that is an explicit communication. I don't like the conduct. But an implicit communication, that is a little bit more difficult to ascertain because people don't know how to say, it makes me uncomfortable. So usually implicit communication goes something like this. Yeah, I'm going to get back to you. I don't know. You know, I'm just, you know. And so it's usually uncomfortable body language. It's like, and so you can kind of tell when people start fidgeting and getting nervous and then, yeah. Another way to determine whether or not you have implicit communication that this is not welcome is the equal initiation or participation. If you're not clear if somebody is implicitly communicating that the conduct is unwelcome, ask yourself this: do they ever initiate? See, if they're not ever initiating, you can pretty much guarantee they're not welcoming the communication. The fact that they go along with you does not mean that they're welcoming it. Sometimes people can't get away from you. We're going to talk about the alphas in a second. So if they're not initiating, it doesn't, and when we say equal participation, that, you know, if somebody is, oh yeah, that's awesome, as they walk away, it's not equal participation either. So watch how people interact. And then we have equal power. Is there equal power? And a lot of times people there are alphas in every business, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with alphas, but I'm going to put it in a term that you'll say, oh yeah, you're right, that's right, I forgot about that. How many of you went to elementary school? Oh my gosh, everybody here went to elementary school. Well, then you probably then saw an alpha at some point when you were in elementary school, because this is when I got introduced to alphas. And here was the alpha. The alpha was the kid that ruled the playground. And the alpha was the kid that everybody wanted to play with. And the alpha was the kid that told everybody else who not to play with. And we all listened to the alpha kid, because if you didn't, well, I won't finish that sentence. Somebody else will tell me, what happened if you played with the kid that the alpha told you not to play with? Anybody remember this? Or was I the only one who was on the playground with the alpha kid? That's right. The alpha kid came after that child. And what did the other kids do? Huh? Joined in. And if the alpha kid didn't like you, what happened to you? Huh? Louder. Ostracized you. Come on, this is elementary school. This isn't the workplace. We're all adults. We can talk about the alpha kid now. He's not in here anymore, and she's not in here anymore. Come on, they're not going to beat us up anymore. They're not going to take our lunch money. Soccer ball. See, we're all scared of the alpha kid still. Right? The alpha kid was a terrifying kid, whether it was a male or a female. And you know what was worse? For girls, we went into middle school with the alpha kid, and she got meaner in middle school. I don't know about boys, but the alpha was the worst in middle school if you were a girl. Because, you ever see the movie Mean Girls? Yeah. You know, I don't know a girl who didn't live that. So we all learned about alphas. We learned about them when we were growing up in school. Those alphas exist in the workplace. And that same culture exists in the workplace. You have the alphas, and if the alphas don't like you, nobody can play with you. And we have that in the workplace, and it's a terrible place to be if you're on the outs with the alpha. So the alpha starts making jokes, and if you don't go along, all of a sudden, you're on the outs with the alpha, and the next thing you know, your life is miserable. And if you don't, and if you see somebody who's on the outs with the alpha, you know better than to stick up for that kid, because you learned your lesson in elementary school. And if you didn't learn your lesson in elementary school, you certainly learned it in middle school. And if you didn't learn it in middle school, you certainly learned it by the time you were in high school. And if you didn't learn it by all of those, you probably had a bigger sister or big brother beating you up, teaching it to you. You know, so we've spent our whole lives learning about alphas. So when you go into the workplace, we think, and this is what I find interesting, is we think that we're supposed to unlearn all of the social behavior when we go into the workplace, and it doesn't happen that way. All of that socialization walks into the workplace, and then we try, as bosses, we try to go in and say, well, ignore all of that and act differently. And it's like, that's not going to happen. That behavior pattern is there, and we don't trust because we've learned not to trust. Because when we were in school, we tried to tattle on the alphas, and that didn't work for us very well. And when we were kids, we tattled on our big brothers and sisters, and that didn't work for us very well either. So we have learned other coping skills. For example, when we're involved in a situation where somebody is telling us stuff we don't want to hear, instead of saying, "Oh, shut up," we've learned, right? Because we don't want to make anybody mad, but we also don't want to hear it. So we just kind of learn to disengage. So examples of harassment. An example of workplace harassment, this is illegal. Workplace harassment involves unwelcome and offensive conduct that's based on, and again, illegal. This isn't bullying. We're going to get into bullying in a second, because bullying is not illegal. This is illegal. Any harassment that is based on race, color, national origin, sex, including pregnancy. And by the way, and I know nobody here does this, but I just have to comment on this because I was at the grocery store yesterday, and I cannot believe this happened in 2014, is that I actually saw a stranger walk up to a pregnant woman and put his hands on her. It was like, oh, look at that. And she stepped away, and that's how I knew she didn't know him. And I did the perfect, like, I just walked away because I didn't own my business. And after I walked away, I felt really bad because I thought, I should have stuck up for her, but I didn't know her, none of my business. But I thought, wow, that strange person just touched that pregnant woman's stomach. That is assault. But and I saw it, and I didn't do anything, which kind of shows you, again, I'm not evolved either. But in work, you can't touch people, including pregnant people, even though it's really cute that they have a human growing inside of them. And I don't know why we think we can. I don't even know how that tradition got started, but you can't. Religion, disability, age, 40 or over, or genetic information. So you're not allowed to make unwelcome or offensive conduct to people. And this includes, and let me give you examples, offensive, derogatory jokes, racial slurs, things like that. Pressure for dates or sexual favors. And when I say pressure for dates and sexual favors, this comes up a lot. Can you ask somebody out? Yes. Can you go out on dates? Yes. There's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. The problem is that if somebody says no and you keep going, So you have to, it's a job. It's not a bar. You're not looking for a connection. So if somebody says no, persistence is not your friend. So you have to know to stop. Unwelcome religious comments. And when I say unwelcome religious comments, because again, people don't know the line to draw. There is, if and I actually do a whole thing on religion. But I'm going to be real brief about this. People think that people don't have the right to be religious in the workplace, and they do. You don't have the right. You don't have the right to be offended by my religious expression. So one of the things that people have to get a grip on is that if I wear, let's say, a cross, which by the way, I'm not wearing a cross, so this is not, you don't know my religious affiliation. I could be agnostic, I could be Jewish, I could be Christian, I could be Muslim. You don't know my religious affiliation. So when I say this without you knowing nothing about my religious affiliation. But you have no right to be offended by anything I display in my religious affiliation. If I wear a cross, or if I wear a Star of David, or if I wear anything that you interpret as a religious artifact, that's on you. Okay? Unless I'm proselytizing, I am wearing a piece of art. Many Christians, many non-Jewish people wear religious artifacts. Unless you're proselytizing, you are not spreading religion. And this is something that I think people lose sight of when it comes to religion in the workplace. It is not proselytizing to wear a religious ornament, a Wiccan symbol, a Christian symbol, a Jewish symbol, a Muslim symbol, whatever symbol, as a piece of jewelry or art. That is not proselytizing, that is wearing jewelry. If you are offended by that and you have taken that piece of jewelry and you have taken your religious interpretation on that jewelry and you have put it on me, that's not my problem. Don't come to me with your unwelcome religious comments and make me wear your religious beliefs. That's offensive to me. Now, if I wear a religious artifact and then proselytize with that religious artifact, feel free to tell me you're offended and to stop doing it. You have a right to do that. But we have a problem in the workplace where people think that I'm not allowed to wear jewelry that is part of a religious, history. And people say, oh, no, you can't do that because that makes this. That makes me nothing. It's so different than me wearing something, what do you call it? There's like a shark's tooth, which somebody calls the devil's horn and somebody else calls David's horn and somebody else. It's a horn. See, whatever you want to put on that, you put on that. But don't come to me telling me what it is and then making me defend what you believe it is. And that's where we get into that whole gray area. And the reason I bring this up is that we just had an incident where, is that we had a woman who was a Catholic who on Palm Sunday got a palm, and she took the palm and she made a cross out of it, and then she gave it to a coworker who was not a Catholic. And the coworker thought it was so touching that she gave it to her that the coworker put it behind her chair on her wall. And she just loved it. And then her boss, the coworker's boss, not the woman who gave it to her, this is whole nother division, came and saw that, took the cross down, put it in the coworker's office and said, I don't like you having that up on your wall because that's a religious artifact and I don't like religion in the workplace because it offends people. Now, the woman who put it up was not Catholic, had never told anybody what her religion was, and didn't put it up as a religious artifact. She put it up because she was touched that this Catholic woman had given it to her. So when he did that, He was actually soliciting an unwelcome religious comment to the woman who had put it up. And she didn't know what to make of it, but she felt highly harassed by it. It was no different than if she had put a picture of a cat up on her wall. Seriously. And he had taken it down saying, well, I've decided that cats are of the devil, and I don't like devil pictures of cats, and I've taken it down. It was his religious interpretation. She had nothing. She meant nothing by it. So that's why you have to be very, very careful when you do things like that. Now, had she been proselytizing, that would have been different. But all she did was hang a palm branch behind her desk. That was all. So be very, very careful. And the reason I just go off of that is that it's one of these things that will get you, if one thing will get you in trouble, that one will get you in trouble. Offensive graffiti, cartoons, or pictures. Most of us don't have problems with this because we have evolved. We know not to put offensive screensavers on our computers, with the exception of one incident recently where somebody decided to do a half-naked picture of George Clooney. Most people do not put pictures on their desk of movie stars and things like that. However, graffiti has not been addressed as body art. So I'm here to address the body art graffiti problem that is starting to arise. If somebody has decided to tattoo something on their body that is extremely offensive, that is offensive graffiti and it has to be covered. And I will give you an example. If I decide that I want to tattoo on the back of my neck, which I'm doing that again, I'd like to show you that there's nothing on the back of my neck, nothing up my sleeves, no tattoos, I'm scared of needles. But let's say that I decided on the back of my neck to graffiti an extremely offensive racial slur. And I decide, because this is a free country and I can say anything I want. And I decide to pin up my hair and walk around in the summer with my hair pinned up and walking around with that offensive slur being shown. You have a right to tell me to put my hair down so that nobody sees it. That is as offensive as me walking around with that slur across my chest in a t-shirt or wrapped up over my chair or whatever. That is an offensive slur. And no, I do not have freedom of speech at the workplace. That has been decided over and over and over again in the courts. So I do not have that freedom. And just because it's tattooed on my body doesn't give me the right to display it to my coworkers. So offensive graffiti, if it's tattooed on my body, still has to remain covered if it's something that cannot be displayed in the workplace. So let's talk dangerous words and excuses. This is what I like to call the interactive session. So all y'all have been kind of sitting there looking at me thinking, wow, it's not 3:30 yet. We get to talk about dangerous words and excuses. And this is how dangerous words and excuses go. Dangerous words and excuses are those words and excuses that happen when people come to complain, and these are the people that will continually come and complain over and over and over again, and for some reason they never go away. No matter what you say, no matter how you say it, they never get their issues resolved, and you don't know why. Why won't they ever get their issues resolved? They keep coming back. They're like a ringing phone. What is going on? Chances are what's going on is when they have come to complain, at some point, the dangerous words or excuses have been said to them. And because, like a ringing phone, they're not getting answered, they're going to keep ringing until someone addresses what is wrong. And what has happened is that when you say any of these dangerous words and excuses, what you have actually done is made the problem worse, not better. So we're going to discuss dangerous words and excuses, why they're dangerous words and excuses, what was actually said to the person, why it can't ever be said again, and why these have to be taken out of every vocabulary in HR and in management and in supervision. And if you can get the employees to stop using it, even better. So let's start with that kind of behavior is part of growing up. Anybody want to take a wild guess why that is a dangerous word or excuse? Anyone? Huh? Just anybody, come on. Throw it out there. I am grown up. Okay. Okay. Another one, yeah. I didn't even think of that one. That's actually a good one. But if somebody says, okay, here's my complaint. I don't like the way Patty's behaving. I mean, she's really offended me. Oh, don't worry about that. You know what? Here's the thing with Patty. That kind of behavior, that's all just part of growing up. Patty offended me. Yeah, but you know what? That's all just part of growing up. Ignore Patty. Why would that make me mad if I'm complaining about Patty? What have I just done? Minimalized it. And how did I minimalize it? I gave power to Patty. See, I just said, you know what? That's all part of growing up. In other words, here's the thing. I get that you're offended. I do. But here's the thing. Patty's young and she's kind of stupid. So we're gonna give it to her. Well, wait a minute. You don't give young and stupid. I mean, not that if anybody's here thinking, well, wait a minute, that's not kind of offensive. I mean, we're not saying I'm Patty. I'm Patty. We're not going to give her a pass. I'm not in here complaining about all the youth culture. I'm complaining about Patty. Do something about her. See, you just gave all the power to her, and you're telling me that I have to go along with that. That's not fair. See, you're excusing a behavior, and you're giving her a right to continue her behavior. There's a culture that you expect me to live up to. Why can't she live up to it too? See, that's not fair. That's not fair. Why does she get away with something I can't get away with? And more importantly, why does she get away with something that nobody else can get away with? Can I walk out the door and go tell all the other people that are the same age as Patty that, hey, guess what? You guys all get a pass too, just like Patty, because that's part of growing up. That's going to be our attitude. There's a different attitude towards the generation as the rest of the generation. How does that make you feel to know that? My generation had to live in this standard, but her generation gets that standard? Is that fair? That's kind of maddening. And by the way, that's very dismissive of Patty's generation too, isn't it? What does that say about my generation? I mean, not my generation, but assuming I'm a 20-year-old. Suspension of disbelief. But that's really unfair to both of us. Because if I get wind of it, it's like, really? You don't think I can behave myself? See, so both of us kind of got insulted there. What I like to say is that you hit us both with the same punch. So that's and so I'm never going to hear that statement. This is one of my favorites. They didn't mean any harm. What's wrong with that? They didn't mean any harm statement. Anybody? What's wrong with that? They didn't mean any harm statement. How do you know what they meant? How do you know what they meant? Right? Well, you know what? It doesn't matter whether or not you were devalued, because they didn't mean any harm. Yeah, but it doesn't matter because they didn't mean anything. So actually it doesn't matter whether or not you were harmed because they didn't mean any harm. See, it does so many things. One, it gets into the mind of the person who harmed you because, we honestly don't know what they meant. Because I got to tell you what, there are sometimes they did mean harm. I was an investigator for 25 years. I can honestly say, yeah, sometimes they do mean harm. I've seen some pretty nasty people out there. And yeah, they do mean harm. I see people that plot, so yeah, you don't know what they meant. A, and B, how dare you devalue my feelings? You just told me that I didn't matter because they didn't mean anything by it. So the fact that they hurt me, and I'm going to give you an example. Here's the scenario. So you're standing outside your house, and you're talking to, I don't know, your neighbor. And while you're talking to your neighbor, their teenager runs out of the house, jumps in the car, and drives away. And while they drive away, they're not paying attention, and they roll over your foot, crushing all of your toes while you're screaming, stop, and there go your toes. And now you have to get, oh, and by the way, did I mention that you've been training to run a marathon for the last 2 years? And the marathon is next week. And now you're on your way to the hospital. You're at the hospital. They wrap it up and they say, my gosh, your toes are crushed. You're never going to be able to ever run a marathon again. And the neighbor who you were talking to while their child ran over your foot turns to you and says, wow, they didn't mean any harm. Do you care? I mean, thanks. But see, I'm the one who can never run a marathon again. What do you kind of want at that moment? Retribution. But at that moment, what would it be kind of nice if someone would give you an apology? See, because you're the one with the crushed toes. See, it doesn't matter whether they meant any harm. See, sometimes whether you mean harm doesn't mean you didn't commit harm. So we have to look at, it doesn't matter what you meant, it doesn't matter what you did. And so when you say, they didn't mean any harm, I don't care. You still crushed my toes. And you owe me an apology. And you have to acknowledge that. Because if you don't acknowledge that, I'm still going to be mad because I'm the one with crushed toes and I can never run a marathon. I don't really care what you meant. You still crushed my toes. Or, it's just a prank that got out of hand. See, that's the one I just love. Just prank that got out of hand. Anybody want to know, take a wild guess what's wrong with that one? Or it's just a joke that got out of hand. Anybody going to guess what's wrong with Close. It was inappropriate to begin with. Okay, how about this? The reason it got out of hand, because if you always say, it's just a prank that got out of hand, the reason it got out of hand is because you got mad. Right? It got out of hand because you got mad, because you wouldn't be sitting here complaining if it wouldn't have got out of hand. So really, you're the fun sucker in the office. Right? It's your fault. It's just a prank that got out of hand because you wouldn't be in here complaining if you would have actually got along with it. So really, the problem is you. Well, wait a minute. That's not fair to me. I am allowed to be offended by things that you shouldn't be having things that get out of hand. Why is it getting out of hand? This is ridiculous. That's how they do things where they come from. Don't worry about it. That's just how they do things where they come from. What's wrong with that? Huh? That's not the way they do things. Thank you. You know what? Because we have a corporate culture here. And if I have to live under that corporate culture, how come you don't? See? Because how many times have you heard this? They can get away with anything, but I can't. Anybody ever heard that? See, I hear that all the time at EEOC. In fact, that's one of the first complaints I get. If it was me, I'd get reprimanded for it, but they can get away with anything. And it usually stems from, well, that's because that's how they do things where they're from. And I always say, well, you know what? How do they do things where you're from? See, I don't care how they do things where they're from. If you have a corporate culture, then everybody should be doing the same thing. So you don't change things up to accommodate everybody's culture. If you're in an office, you have a policy and everybody lives by that. See, that's what we like to call a level playing field for everybody. And if nobody complained, what's the big deal? Anybody want to see the big red flag with that one? This one, when I say it, you'll say, oh yeah, that one's pretty obvious. I'm complaining. Thank you. I'm complaining, you just called me nobody. If I'm complaining, I'm not nobody. So when you say if nobody complained, what's the big deal? Well, am I invisible? I just complained. So if I complained, I'm somebody. Therefore, I'm not nobody. So what are you saying? If nobody complained. Well, in other words, if Patty complained, what's the big deal? That's the translation. right? It should be, okay, Patty, you complained, so we're going to take it, we're going to listen to it. But if you're saying, well, if nobody complained, what's the big deal? Really? Okay, so what you're saying, if she complained, you'd listen, but if I'm complaining, or what am I, just like this instrument that drones on and on like white noise in your office? I mean, wow, how dismissive. I don't want to say that was the most insulting thing I've heard all day, but it's really close. It's just, wow. And, everybody else was okay with it. Well, I don't care. See, I'm still complaining. And what's your problem? Wow. What's your problem? Anybody ever been told that? So what's your problem? Okay. Anybody want to tell me what's wrong with being asked what's your problem? Anybody see what's wrong with that question? What's your problem? Hey lady, what's your problem? Well, let's start with you asked a question about what's my problem. I didn't have a problem until you asked me what my problem was. Now I got a problem. Anybody have that problem? Right? I mean, because I've been in that situation where I don't have a problem. Somebody says, what's your problem? Well, I got a problem now. I didn't have a problem then. Now you ask me what my problem is. And when you ask me that, now I got a problem. See, I didn't have a problem. But the way you asked me, yeah. And, oh, can't you take a joke? What are they asking? When they say, can't you take a joke, what are they really saying to you? You're being too sensitive. Right. You know what being too sensitive is? It's like being a picky eater. I know, I'm serious. Okay, and I'm going to tell you what being a picky eater is. Being a picky eater is not eating the food I like. That's a picky eater. Because if you like the same food I like, we wouldn't have a problem. Think that out. We would go to dinner, we would go out to eat, and we would never disagree on the menu. See, you become a picky eater when you don't eat the food I like. That's a picky eater. You know what being too sensitive is? You don't like the stuff I like. See, if you like the exact same stuff I like, you aren't too sensitive. You become too sensitive when you don't like the same thing I like and you make issues out of it. That's being too sensitive. Do you ever realize that? See, if you don't like what I like, you're too sensitive. As long as you and I are on the same page, we get along just fine. And that's the problem with being too sensitive. And, oh, sorry, next one. Okay, more dangerous words and excuses. You need to learn how to handle things. Anybody want to take a wild guess why that was a dangerous word and excuse? Come on, I know someone's been told this. I have a whole room full of women. No offense to the men, but women get told this all the time, right? You need to learn how to handle things. Or am I the only woman who's ever been told that? Okay, why does that send you into orbit?
Well, all has your statements are blame shifting.
There you go.
It tends to shut down any type of conversation period.
Right.
Blame shifts to the other person. Now we're not going to go any further because they probably don't want to confront me.
And when you say something like, and you're right, you blame shift and you don't want to discuss it, but also when you say things like you need to learn how to handle things, it also indicates an incompetence on your end. See, it says, the problem is you don't know how to handle things. You're incompetent. See, if you know how to handle things better, we wouldn't have this problem. So you need to learn how to handle things. Why don't you get back in there and handle it? Really? See, that's going to keep causing problems. Or just ignore it. There's its cousin to you need to learn how to handle things. If you don't know how to handle things, you also need to learn to ignore it. So why don't you just ignore it? What's the problem with ignoring it? Well, it not only not go away, but you also give power back to the person who did it. And boys will be boys, girls will be girls. Oh, I hate that. And then we have the empowering, what I call is the, they put their arm around everyone. That's the, you give power to the other person. Well, they put their arms around everybody. So that's the, well, you know what? They're a nice guy. So what we're going to do, we're going to give a pass to the other person. So Ignore the fact that they're offending you. We like this person better than you. That's actually, they put their arm around everybody. It's your fault for being too sexy. That's the blame statement. It's like, well, you know what? If you weren't so good looking, this wouldn't be happening to you. But don't worry, someday you're going to be old and no one will hit on you anymore. Really? That's your solution. And why can't you just learn to accept a compliment? See, it's not really an insult, it's a compliment. You just don't recognize that as a compliment, so why don't you just learn to accept it? So, okay, and I love it. My favorite one is, it's just teasing, it's no big deal. Never seen that happen. So, what's the big deal with harassment when it comes to workplace hostility? Here's the thing, when it comes down to workplace issues, legal and illegal. And the key issues when you're dealing with the legality of it is context, frequency, severity. If the Supreme Court has ruled this 100 times over, it has to be frequent, it has to be regular, there has to be a certain context in order for it to be illegal, and they use a reasonable person standard. The reasonable person standard says, would a reasonable person in the same or similar circumstances, would they be offended by this? Would they consider this as harassment? And the standard keeps changing based on culture. So what the standard, reasonable person standard was about 10 years ago has changed, and the standard's been lowered. So with the reasonable, so 10 years ago, the reasonable person standard was pretty high. It keeps getting lower every year, and that's a good thing, because nowadays we look at it and say, well, that was really offensive. Whereas 10 years ago, we would look at the same behavior and say it was no big deal. So that's a good thing. As far as the identity of the harasser and the victim, you know, when you look at who can offend and who can harass and who can't legally and illegally, the harasser as well as the target can be a man or a woman. We don't have rules on who can harass and who can't at EEOC. Sometimes you listen to radio talk shows and 24-hour cable news channels and these panels, and they say, well, you know, men can't be harassed. That's not true. Men can be harassed. As a matter of fact, EEOC takes a lot of cases of harassment, sexual harassment by men. And here's the thing: you don't have to be have a sexual intent to sexually harass. That was decided on the Oncali case, on Oncali versus Sundowner Riggs. It doesn't have to be a sexual intent to sexually harass. If it's just sexual in nature, so we don't have to prove sexual intent. In other words, if you're walking past somebody and they go, oh yeah, you're really hot stuff, you're really awesome, want to hit that, and then later the defense is, well, I wasn't sexually attracted to them, so I had no sexual intent, therefore it wasn't sexual harassment, I was just being obnoxious. You know, and we've actually had this defense. The court said, no, actually, that was sexual harassment. The fact that you were being obnoxious is just a plus. But the harassment in and of itself was sexual harassment. So you can't harass people like that and get away with it. I'm going to pass through that. I want to get into who's liable. When is an agency liable for the harassment? When it comes down to your protection and your liability, you are, and I want to start with the non-employed. You are responsible to protect people from harassment, from non-employees, vendors, contractors, people like that. So say you are in a position where somebody shows up at your agency, and you have a receptionist, and they show up and they just start hurling racial slurs at them, and your supervisor, one of your supervisors, comes out and hears the racial slurs. They are responsible to protect that employee from those racial slurs. That's not allowed. That's illegal. The employee is not supposed to be subjected to that, because this is a vendor, a customer, or a client, and they're a non-employee, and it doesn't matter. They are just legally protected from that. That is different than if somebody shows up at the receptionist and decides that they are tired of their dollars being paid to present to protect you, you silly government employees, and I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to rail on government employees, and why are you using my tax dollars for these staplers? And they just start railing for no reason at all. There's no legal obligation to protect your employee from that. As obnoxious as those people are, they happen, and that is the price of doing business. When you are a government employee, people just randomly walk up and start screaming at you. Try working for the EEOC where nobody shows up happy. So we go through that all the time. But if they show up and they start hurling racial epithets, that's where you have to draw the line. You're not allowed to do that, or sexually harassing your employees, etc. Co-workers, frequency, acquiescence by supervisor, and failure to take immediate and appropriate remedy. Alpha employee. So let's say I'm the alpha employee, because I want to play alpha employee, because I like the fact that you all want to be my friend and hang out with me on the schoolyard. So I have that horrible racial slur tattooed behind my neck because I am that obnoxious. And it's summer, and there's an employee that I want to harass. So I clip my hair up, and every day I walk past that employee with that slur on my head, and the employee is just horrified and upset and just driven to tears, and goes to their supervisor and says, please have Patty take her clip down. That's awful. That's offensive. I can't stand it. It's such a hostile work environment. And the employee and the supervisor says, well, I really don't know what you want me to do about it, because it is a tattoo and I can't certainly tell her to remove the tattoo from her neck. You're just going to have to, learn to live with it. Why don't you just ignore it, because that's how they do things where Patty comes from. And, she's young. So, that's just part of who she is. So sorry about that, but, can't you take a joke? Okay, so if they do that, the company's liable. The agency's liable. That person can now go and file a charge with EEOC, or they can file it with Cherie's agency, and chances are really good that they're probably going to prevail, because you guys, not you guys, but the agency knew, the supervisor knew, they were put on notice, and they had an opportunity to remedy the situation, and they didn't. An employee was subjected to racial harassment, and it was offensive, and it was pervasive, and no one did anything about it. The top level official, if the top level official engages in harassment, and the top level official does nothing about it, like let's say I'm the top level official, I'm a high-ranking official, I'm a director, and I decide I just like that tattoo, and I wear my hair up, and I do that every single day. No one has to report me about it. Go to me and say, Patty, please take your hair down. So you guys can just go and just file a charge with the EEOC, and we will gleefully take care of that on our own. You don't have to ask anybody. You don't have to complain to anybody. You can come straight to us. But as far as the reporting process, if it's an employee, coworker, you do have to go and complain. If it's a top level official, you don't have to complain internally. You can come just straight to us, and we will take care of it. If it's a supervisor, you have to report it. Supervisor, you have to give the agency, the supervisor, a chance to remedy it. So if a supervisor is harassing you, so let's say I'm a supervisor, you still have to give the agency a chance to do some sort of remedy with the situation. So if I'm a supervisor, you have to go and report it to somebody else, so that at least the agency has a chance, the middle line supervisor has a chance to remedy the situation. So if I'm doing this and you see this, you have to go and report it to somebody within the agency and say, hey, you know what, Patty's doing this is really offensive. Please make her stop. And if the agency doesn't take action, then at that point you can go file a charge and say, you know what, I tried to take care of this situation. I went and I reported it to somebody. Nobody took care of it. Nobody cared. And now I want to file a charge with the EEOC. And then you guys have to explain why, when it was reported, nobody took nobody took care of it and just told me to take my hair down. You may come back and say, well, it was a tattoo and there's nothing we can do. And we're going to say, well, why did you tell her to put down her hair? And you're going to lot of stuff. If it occurs to us, we're going to ask why it didn't occur to you. Now, the problem you may face is that you may have a situation where you have an employee, and this is your dangerous territory. You may have a situation where, let's say that I'm a supervisor and I want to harass an employee, an African-American employee, let's say, and I had this horrible racial slur scrawled across my neck, and I want to harass that employee by showing them that horrible racial slur every single day, and that employee doesn't even know where to go. I mean, they're just traumatized every day seeing this, and so they go to a mid-level supervisor or an HR person that they trust, not necessarily within their chain of command, just somebody that they like. And they say, you know, I have to tell you something, but don't tell anybody. Yeah, you see where this is going. Patty has this horrible racial slur tattooed across her neck, and this is what it says, and then you gasp in horror, oh. And she parades it around me, and I don't know what to do. And I have to tell you, it traumatizes me to no end, but I don't know what to do about it. You have to tell them, I am so sorry to tell you this. And I will try to do this in the most sensitive manner possible. But because you have reported this to me, and because this is so egregious, I have to take steps against her on this. I have to make her stop doing this to you. And the employee will say, no, I don't want you to do this, I'm going to get in trouble. It's like, no, you won't. You will go under my protection. I will make sure you are protected before I do anything. And that's your first step, is to protect the employee. And then you go and you report it. There is no such thing when an employee reports discrimination, especially something that egregious, to keep it to yourself. Because here's what will happen later on. That employee will come to EEOC and they will report this harassment. And we're going to say, did you ever inform management? Guess what they will say? Huh? Yeah, they're going to say yes, and guess how they're going to say it? No, they're not going to say that. They never say, no, I did ask them not to say that. They're going to say, I did. I told Patty about this, you know, and I told her, you know, about this, and I was just so traumatized when I told her. So you think I can get money? See, they don't ever remember telling you not to say anything. I've never in my career ever remembered anybody remembering not to tell you to tell anybody. Always tell, always. And the reason why you tell is here's why. It's not because you want to break a confidence, but because you don't want that going on your watch. You know, I know that person doesn't want anybody to know. I get that. But there's somebody doing something really terrible to somebody. That behavior should not ever be tolerated. And the minute you get that behavior out of your workplace, the better for you and everybody. Because if they're doing it to that person, who are they going to do it to next? Don't let that behavior go on. Yeah.
So since we're all HR people, someone could make that complaint to the HR person in the agency. What if it's the agency director that's the harasser?
Then you go. Then you find a safe place to go to complain about the agency director. So there has to be. The great thing about government is there's always somebody hired to complain to. So if you have to find the higher place to go, then complain. But find a place to go, a safe haven to go to complain. Is that possible? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, but I would actually find a safe haven to go make that complaint then. And I would explain why you're going to a safe haven to make that complaint, and explain it. You know, because you have to do it because the liability is so high. And because if it's an agent, if it's an agency director, the problem is that an agency director, top level official, you have no defense if they're violating the law. Zero. defense. You lose every single time, period. Because they can't say, well, I didn't know the law, I didn't know. Yes, you did. And if you didn't know, you should have known. The state of Wyoming, in your case, because you're the state, like EEOC, the EEOC, we're automatically liable for their actions. They can't get away with it. You don't get a pass. See, an employee, you get a pass. You can always say, well, I didn't know, well, the supervisor didn't tell me, because you have discipline. But when you're the top level, you have no, you don't get a pass on your behavior. And people say, well, they get away with it all the time. They get away with it all the time because nobody's reporting it.
So what if you get an agency director that's appointed and he's a former rancher and has never been through EEO training?
Well, then the next question I have is, why haven't they been through EEO training? The obligation of the people that put them in charge should have been to make sure they get it. So then it's like, well, who's appointing them? Well, that's usually the governor or somebody like that. I would get to somebody on the governor's staff or whoever's making the appointments and say, hey, you need to know this is going on because there is a liability issue attached. You know, this is the stuff that makes headlines in newspapers. And if you don't pay attention to it when it happens, you're going to pay attention to it later. It either happens now or it happens later. But these are the kind of things that end up getting people in trouble every single time. And it gets them in trouble every single time. So they have to know, they have an obligation. And they have to know that the higher level official they are, the more liability attaches to them, period. There's not even a but, ... it's just a period attached. Okay, so let's talk microaggressions while we've got some time left so you guys can understand what are microaggressions. You know, the microaggressions are the brief and commonplace indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostility or negative slights and insults that potentially have harmful or unpleasant psychological impact. So when we talk about microaggressions, and this is what we've been talking about in the dangerous words, but we're gonna mention them. Like, for example, here are microaggressions. You're pretty smart for a girl. That's a microaggression. So you don't know why you just felt like you got hit, but you got hit. It was like, ow, that hurt. Ow. Or, you know what, you speak pretty good English considering your race. Ow, ow, that hurt. Or, wow, you sure are understanding for a man. Ow, that hurt. Or, well, it's remarkably how well you comprehend technology considering how old you are. Ow. See, these are microaggressions. They're meant, you know, when you first hear it, they sound like a compliment, but they're meant to hit you. And sometimes people say it without even meaning to it. I brought up my father. My father is a classic microaggression kind of guy. And he doesn't mean to be the microaggression kind of guy, but he is. You know, like my father's favorite line is, stop acting like a girl. Yeah, and he doesn't know that it really just grates on my nerves. So that's his classic insult. You throw like a girl, you act like a girl, you whine like a girl. Hi, Dad, I can hear you. Said the girl. I mean, but you live with those microaggressions, and he doesn't realize how hostile those words are to me. But you live with those your whole life, and it starts really annoying you. And so when you get into the workplace and somebody says something to you, it's like they hit you, and they don't realize they've hit you. And so we have to be really cognizant of that when we deal with people, because some of us deal with microaggressions all the time, and you don't realize that you've actually hit somebody with a microaggression and you didn't realize it. Like for example, if you're like, I'll give an example for a man, because my brother is an extremely sensitive guy. I mean, he's a very sensitive guy. He's got a heart of gold. He can hear you and understand you and empathize with you. But my father just gave him so much grief. Now you're acting like a girl, Bernie. And Bernie would just crush him. And so now Bernie's in the business, and my brother actually is a chef, so he never deals with human emotions where he works. But let's say that Bernie was actually in a position where he dealt with human emotions, and Bernie's listening to you talk about something, and his boss was to come in and say, oh, I see you're the Dr. Phil of the group or something. that could hit Bernie like a microaggression and make him very angry, because he's been told all of his life that his sensitivity is a bad thing, because Bernie's always heard being a girl is a bad thing. So he would interpret it as a microaggression, which would hurt his feelings. And or his boss may think, well, Dr. Phil's a great guy. I wish I was more like Dr. Phil. And he thinks it's a compliment, but Bernie hears as a microaggression. So you have to be cognizant that when you say things that you if people tend to react with a bristling, that you go back and say, oh my gosh, did I just insult you? Because my intent was not to insult you. My intent was to compliment you, because I think you are very understanding, and I wish more people were as empathetic as you are. Or, my gosh, I think you are so smart, and I wish I was as smart as you were. Instead of saying, well, you're pretty smart for a girl. And clarifying it to people. Bullying. Now, what is bullying? Bullying is different than a microaggression. Bullying is unwanted, repeated aggressive behavior that involves a real or perceived power imbalance that manifests as verbal abuse, conduct which is threatening, humiliating, intimidating, or sabotage that interferes with work, thus creates a hostile, offensive, and toxic workplace, but does not rise to the level of illegal harassment. And that's why I bring this up, because it is not illegal. So why should an agency stop bullying? Because even though it's not illegal, people say, oh, well, it's not illegal, so why should we stop it? I like to talk about the theory of cognitive dissonance. Social psychologist Leon Festinger. By the way, does anybody know who social psychologist Leon Festinger is? Because I'm a geek. Did anybody know who this is? Okay. So, and this is actually 1970s is when it came around, but he really got popular again when this bully incident happened with Karen Klein, the bus driver monitor. And we're going to talk about her in a second. Which I'm really glad that he came back up, because, as a student of social behavior, I love Leon Festinger. So, and I really encourage people to look up cognitive dissonance. He proposed a theory of cognitive dissonance, which is society is motivated to maintain consistency in thoughts, feelings, and actions, which is society needs to keep the ego reassured. What is being done is right and proper, but above all is consistent. We live with consistency, and we love consistency in human behavior. So because we love consistency in human behavior, we look at how to keep things even leveled. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is we tend to acquiesce to the biggest personality in the room. So when we get a bullies, when they start bullying, what we do is we acquiesce to their bullying personality. So has anybody heard about well, you probably have when I tell you about this. But there was an issue that happened, and this is where Leon Festinger actually started gaining recognition again. There was an issue that involved a bus driver called Karen Klein, and she was the bus. She was a bus monitor. And there was a video that was out called "Making the Bus Monitor Cry." It's a 10-minute video. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you, get it on the internet, watch it. It's highly offensive. It's about 10 minutes long. It's just laced with the F-bomb by middle schoolers. And it actually picks up halfway through the bullying, and it picks up with Karen saying, I'm crying. And this is a middle-aged woman, and she's asking them to stop bullying her, and she does everything right. She tries to bat away the bullying as far as changing their vision. She tries to engage them in other discussions. She ignores them. She does everything you're supposed to do, and they keep coming back like attacked dogs. And no matter how she tries to take the target off of her, they don't relent. They keep coming after and after and after and after. And that's how bullies work. Bullies never give up. They say, ignore a bully, they'll go away. Bull. Bullies never go away. They keep coming at you because it's fun to bully. And so after the video, people started going back to Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance. What happened? And because they wanted to psychologically analyze these bullies. And because the kids, they just went crazy on her. And they went from 0 to 100 in like minutes. And so they wanted to say, why does a decent person bully? Because all of the kids that were analyzed and interviewed, they said, no, we're not bullies, we're decent people. No, we're not bullies, not us, And they said, okay, well, what happened? And they said, well, in the case of Karen Klein, unbeknownst to the participants, because they interviewed all of them and socially analyzed all of them, little did they know that the bully and leaders, the alphas, injected conflict into their inconsistent-hating minds. See, they didn't like the conflict that was going on, so they have to remedy this. So what they did is it forced them to balance out the conflict that was going on, and the only way they could do it is the only way any of us do it. And since you can't go against the alpha, because what did we learn in elementary school? What happens when you go against the alpha? What? You get ostracized. So but you have to balance out the conflict, because decent people don't bully. So the only other alternative for you is you make the victim the problem. Why can't you get along? What's your problem? No one else had a problem with it, right? See, this is what we're learned to do, and this is what they did. So what they did is they did what all of us do. But you see it in middle school, you actually see the behavior being developed. The social reality of bullying and harassment is that harassment is a team sport. This is the one thing that we've learned over and over and over again, is that it is a team sport, and that the mob process itself can be exhilarated by the endorphins that are produced by bullying. It is an exhilarating process. It's fun, which is why we did it in elementary school. It's why they did it in middle school. It's why you did it in high school, not you, but the collective you. People like to bully. It's more fun to bully than to be bullied. And if you can be on one end or the other, you're going to pick the end that bullies. And so when the kids started to bully Karen, the ones they could bully did bully, and the ones that didn't think they could get away with it just stayed in the vision. And then one person actually videotaped it. The social reality of bullying is that the power over another person, and this is sociology, they have proven this, is that the power over another person can make normal people act reckless and unempathetic in their behavior. And the worse the behavior is, the more your inconsistency, the more your brain actually tries to rationalize your extraordinary behavior by seeing the bullied person in some way disgusting. It actually works with, and you can, and I actually encourage people to do this. Look this up. Don't take my word for it. And look it up, because it's actually fascinating when you start looking into empathetic behavior versus negative association. The more you negatively associate somebody with, the more your empathy drops. So the more negative assumption, the less empathy. So if you can start getting a positive assumption, the more empathy you have until you can balance it up. But the minute you start having negative assumption about somebody, that you start dropping your empathy. And this is what happens in every bullying situation. You have a negative assumption about that person, and you immediately start dropping your empathy. And this is what gives you the right to bully. You get a right to bully in your head. You think you have that right. Not you, but collectively. And this is why they allow it. And this is why everybody allows it to happen. This is why you can stand by and watch somebody be bullied. Somehow it's their fault. They caused it. And this is how we actually allow it to happen. And we allowed it to happen when we were in elementary school, because we never stood up for it. Oh, I don't want to get involved. The reason why we have ineffective resolutions, and this is why when I talk about resolutions, why you have to be really careful about how you resolve a bullying conflict, is you can't do conflict resolution or peer mediation. Because this is what happens when you have a conflict resolution or peer mediation, is that it implies that both parties are responsible. If you've had a situation where you have bullies, and you have a harassment situation where you have somebody who's just going off on somebody else, if you have a conflict resolution or a peer mediation, it will fail every single time, because it implies both parties are responsible. You have grown up with bullies your whole life. The one thing by now you must have learned is that the bully bullies, the victim is victim. Both parties are not equally responsible. If you have a conflict resolution, it implies responsibility by both parties. So if you have a victim, and that victim has had no responsibility, and you have somebody who has all the responsibility, you automatically have a power imbalance. And so it fails to recognize the harassment Bullying is abuse. And so the harasser, the bully, doesn't have to take responsibility, full responsibility for what they're doing. Therefore, they get to keep doing, because when you bring the victim face to face with their abuser, it allows the abuser the opportunity to continue the abuse, because they get to tell the victim what they're doing that's so disgusting that makes them abuse them. See, it becomes a vicious cycle. It gives them power. It doesn't take them away. The next thing that they do, which is a terrible thing, because usually when the conflict resolution doesn't work, the next thing we usually do with a bullying situation is we bring everybody together and we try to have a group intervention or a group counseling, because we think, well, maybe if we all get together and have group intervention, maybe that will happen. Terrible idea. It's the second worst thing to do, because this usually escalates the problem. And here's why. It gives the mob mentality. You're back in grade school again. And now suddenly the best scenario for the bully person is put into place, and the worst scenario for the victim is put in place. And all of a sudden, the abuser is now put in the alpha position where they are the most comfortable with. You're back in grade school watching the alpha, having to pick sides. And where are you going to go? Where did you learn to go when you were in grade school? With the alpha. So you've got the group identifies with the harasser and the bully, and not with the victim, because you've been taught since elementary school to go to the alpha, because what happens if you don't go to the alpha? Woe to you, right? So you already know, you've been taught and socialized into what behavior pattern to accept. And so now you've reinforced the bully behavior, because the bully already knows this is, I'm in control. And see, everything I thought about the victim, where they're disgusting, is absolutely true. So I've just been reinforced in the power differential and in my behavior, and therefore I'm right. So this is why it's a terrible strategy. The next one that we do is simple short-term solutions, which is we address bullying and harassment as a single topic or a single day training, which gives the impression that, you know what, I'm doing this because I have to have a sign-off sheet, so don't bully, okay, goodbye, and go have lunch. And again, it shows that we're not really serious about it. And again, the bully rolls her eyes and says, you know, we're doing the sensitivity training because so-and-so got their feelings hurt. And everybody says, yeah, you're right, this is, you know, and then everybody goes back to the alpha. So it still gives the alpha power. So what we find the most effective solutions are, if you have a bully situation, and I mean a real bully situation, is the best way to handle it is you have to train all your employees about harassment and bullying in the workplace. And that means bringing in a real sensitivity training counselor. It's an all-day thing where you bring them in and you actually have, not EEOC, because we just train on the law and we're not sensitive, but I mean a real sensitivity, someone who is trained in workplace sensitivity, where they sit down and with the real people that are really the problems, and they sit down and they actually train people on how to spot bullying behavior, how to recognize bullying behavior, how to regroup the workplace, how to set forth policies, how we're not going to do this anymore. And this is our new, whoops, I just turned this off. Hold on. Well, okay. I hit stuff. I'm sorry. Well, good, I only got 5 minutes left. I just hand stuff. See, here. Thank you. When we just deal with our new normal, and you actually train them into a new normal, and then you hold everybody responsible. Because when you have an effective anti-harassment policy, which you distribute to all the employees, and you put it on the website, and I always say you don't distribute it once a year, you distribute it twice a year. I recommend daylight savings time, spring forward and fall back. You get it twice a year with a reminder of how to complain. And then what you do is you enforce the policy and you put respect in the performance appraisal. And when I say you put respect in the performance appraisal, I mean you hold managers and supervisors responsible. If people are complaining about your bullying behavior, or if they're complaining about other people's bullying behavior, that goes on your performance appraisal, and guess what? You don't get your outstanding. This is the most important thing in our workplace, and if you don't stand by the principles, tough, you don't get your outstanding performance appraisal. It's not about how many widgets you make. It's about how many widgets you make and how many complaints you get. It's about how many widgets you make and how easily you and how you effectively resolve this. It's about how many widgets you make, and it's about how safe people feel in your environment. It's about training also people to be more than a bystander. It's about when somebody sees somebody else getting bullied, being able to feel comfortable to go and report it. And that's one of the things that we try to explain to people. It's not just about the bully, it's also about everybody else. It's about learning how to be more than a bystander. One of the problems that we've had, and this has been the greatest problem, if we could say that there's any problem at all, is that all of you were trained, including me, that we were all trained to be bystanders. And we were trained to be bystanders since we were kids. And here's why we were trained to be a bystander. You were trained to be a bystander because you were taught when you were a kid that if you weren't a bystander, you would suffer a terrible consequence because you didn't have people there in the wings, the adults and people that should have been there protecting you from when you went and said, you know what, Johnny or Sally is picking on this kid and I don't think that's right. What we were told is let them work it out. Ignore them. And if you ignore a bully, they'll go away. And what we were not taught is, you know what, bullies don't go away. They grow up and they become bigger bullies. And so they need to be taught how to socialize into normal society. And so I'm here to tell you, bullies don't go away. They need to learn how to socialize in a normal society, and they can't socialize in a normal society. But it takes somebody to be more than a bystander, and it takes somebody with a willing commitment. And that's why I always like to get to my last slide, which is EEOC's vision is justice and equality in the workplace. And so I want to leave you with what's yours. And when people say, well, that's kind of a hokey way to leave this, it's like, well, no, not really, it's not that hokey. Because I've been here for 25 years, and here's what I've seen in 25 years. When I started working at EEOC in 25 years ago, and by which EEOC is an unbelievably small agency. We don't have the power and the money and the resources like the Department of Treasury, the Department of State, or any of those other agencies. But here's what we've been able to do. We've been able to get people to buy into our vision. And because we've been able to get people to buy into our vision, we've been able to get them to say, you know what, I don't like being minimalized, which is why 25 years ago, when I walked into the workplace, it was acceptable. And by the way, those of you, I'm going to start with women. Those of you who are women who have been in the workplace for longer than 25 years, you know what I'm talking about. It was acceptable to call us honey and dear and sweetheart in the workplace 25 years ago. EEOC didn't stop that language. It was women and men who stopped that language when EEOC said, could you join with us to tell everybody that that's not acceptable, it's minimizing. You know, when I started working at EEOC, it was acceptable to walk around calling older workers geezers and things like that, and that's not acceptable anymore because EEOC said, you know what, could you guys join with us and say, you know what, it's really not acceptable to minimize the contributions of our older workers. So it takes, I won't quote Hillary Clinton, but it really does take a village. And when you're more than a bystander and you realize that if you buy into the vision of justice, equality of the workplace, if you just one person in this room buys into it, you can get one other person to buy into it, and you can actually change your own work environment. Because EEOC can't, but we can if everybody buys into it with us. So that being said, that is my direct phone number, and that is my direct email. You can contact me anytime. I actually do answer my phone calls, and I actually do answer my emails. I really do. So you can find me anytime. I'm the easiest person at EEOC to find on the web. If you Google me, Patricia McMahon, EEOC, I come up for like 10 pages, and it's all my phone number and my direct email. So that being said, it is now 3:30. You're on break. Thank you very much for your time.